Season 2 is out now. This is a new episode of Dev Pro Podcast. Welcome guys! Follow me on Instagram and Facebook. If you want to write me, there is the email on the description.
Biography section.
Today a new episode of an artist that I have already talked in the previous season, and I'm talking about Quorthon of Bathory. In the previous season I didn't talk very much deeper about this incredible legend of black Viking Nordic metal, but remember guys, never label this band, because it's simply impossible. If I will forget something, I apologize, I try to do my best. I just want to dedicate this episode to this man that deserves all the respect of this world, despite the lies and rumors that created a huge conflict inside the media around the world. I try to talk about him with all the possible attention and care. Quorthon real name Thomas Ace Borje Forsberg, but let's simply call him Ace or Quorthon. He was born on 17 February 1966 in a Stockholm suburb. His father is the producer Borje Boss Forsberg, but they always denied until Quorthon's death they were father and son. Thanks to Bloodfire Death book, we discover a bit more about this mysterious artist. His mother's name is still unknown, and Borje was only 20 years old when he started to be a father. He was working at the time as a sound technician, and his son was always in the studio because him and Quorthon's mother didn't have family members around them to help. In the 70s, Borje founded the label Typhoon. Around 1975, Quorthon started to play drums. His first songs to play were from Kiss, one of his favorite bands. Borje once came back from the store, giving to him a drum kit, and he was so happy that he started to carry the drums in the forest nearby to practice. After they moved in a bigger house, the kids organized a Kiss concert for their parents with even their makeup. Quorthon has three brothers, Anders, Limpan and Jenny, known as Jenny Tabler, for the cover of Song to Lullaby and Silver Wing Song, with Quorthon's arrangement and lyrics that you can listen on Spotify and even on the CD In Memory of Quorthon Volume 3. Around 1978, Ace was kicked out of school for his rebellious character. He was breaking windows and causing chaos around. This didn't discourage him, but it was a new beginning. Borje discovered a special talent in his son, and he eventually started to work part-time on the label. In 1980, Borje divorced and Quorthon moved in Vällingby, a Stockholm suburb. He felt emarginated, but despite that, he started to play guitar and be more enthusiastic about the music career. The first work in the music was the cover art. His hand holding a skull candle with fake blood, and it was the cover of Oz, Fire in the Brain, published in 1983 under Typhoon. Oz is a Finnish heavy metal band that moved from Finland to Sweden to live in their music dream, and meanwhile they were recording this album, they were living together with Borje and Quorthon. J.C. Blade of Oz said in an interview in Finnish on Inferno.fi, Ace Forsberg mastered English and we became friends immediately. The other guys in Oz weren't very good linguists, so they didn't hang out with the Swedes very much. I then managed to talk the entire Oz membership into living with Ace and his father Borje. The Forsberg apartment wasn't the cleanest anyway. There was such a stagnant, dirty energy in the room, and there were piles of porn magazines half a meter high everywhere. The walls of the room also had the pentagons upside down, and so on. Well, one day I would ask if I could take a bath. However, you were not allowed to go into the tub because it was filled to the brim with all the dirty water. There was all kinds of mess. That boss just said that someone need to fix it first. We'll look at the situation later. He banged on dirty mattresses and the skin was covered with fucking bacteria. Ace got another gift from Oz training camp. There was a bench called the Death Couch. It was full of ticks from all over the world, and Ace mistakenly slept in it once. The bare hand was leaning against the couch, and it was full of red spots in the morning. The punks had spent a festive night. Lewis remembers Quorthon as a nice and energetic guy with plenty of odd habits and strange powers. For example, he liked to drink hot water mixed with spices. The old man put all possible spices into the water, and finally the liquid turned into a hellishly strong liquid. Ace also collected egg storage boxes. He dreamed of putting them on the walls of the training room one day. In the end, there was an insane pile of empty boxes, but he never got the room he wanted, and Bathory didn't train either. Once we were at a house party in the suburb of Stockholm. Ace suddenly asked, "Do you want to see me spit fire?" Then he drew a sprite into his mouth and blew an absolute insane flame. Gene Simmons can't do nearly the same. I hadn't seen him do 5 things before, and I asked, "When did you learn these skills?" It just happened that I went for a little workout in the forest. Another time we were at the bar, and he asked if you want to see a glass break. Well, he pointed at the thick glass with a big panther ring and mumbled something along the lines of, "By the power of Satan I will break this glass," and then the pint exploded without physical contact. And, believe it or not, he was basically a relatively positive guy. He was mostly in a pretty good mood, and it wasn't gloomy at all, but at the same time he was hellishly interested in Satanism. For example, we often talk about matters of the spirit world. He went to Stockholm's Royal Library for a while, looking for information about witchcraft and whatever. Then he could start some story about how would it be great to be a hellish big creature flying in the night sky, flapping his glittery wings. After J.C. Blade Worlds, we arrived to the most important years for Quorthon. Between 1980 and 1983, he started practicing with some friends in punk groups with strange names like Oi. But the turning point came on 16 March 1983. To be more accurate, Quorthon met on this day 2 guys, a drummer and a bassist. The drummer was the famous Jonas Åkerlund, movie and music videos director, while the bassist is Fredrik Melander, known as Hanoi. He chosen this name thanks to the band Hanoi Rocks. The 3 guys met at Music Borsen in Sigtuna Gatan, a Stockholm street, and they started to work on certain songs and rehearsed. Quorthon choosing this name for all his music career for many reasons. He wanted to use weird names impossible for a Swedish to pronounce and to make fun of the Swedish rock band Europe, because according to him, the nickname Tempest was inappropriate and ridiculous. He took inspiration for this name thanks to a book called Musta Magia Iosa, written by Peter Sitoin, and the name probably means dark demon for a dark princess. The real name written in this book was originally Quorthon, but he decided to call himself Quorthon to create more difficulties in the pronouns and to appear more evil. But it was just image and something innocent according to many interviews I've read on the websites. The name Bathory, he took inspiration after he visited the London dungeon. He remained impressed by the figure of this Hungarian countess called Elizabeth Bathory, in English Elizabeth Bathory. In an interview he made in 1990, which you can find on YouTube in Portugal, he said that the countess' surname was Nadasti. He was fascinated by the horror story of this countess that killed many women and took a bath with their own blood. In 1983, Jonas and Fredrik left Sweden for holiday to London, so Quorthon needed to continue with other musicians from the previous band Oi. Thanks for the info to Swedish Death Metal Book. Now, like many Bathory fans know, the lineup changed so much that it's even impossible to identify the exact members that took part of this band. Swedish Death Metal Book tried to identify some of them, but it's impossible to be 100% accurate about this information. Richard Bergman on bass and Johan Elven on drums. With this temporary lineup, they recorded live on rehearsal places Sacrifice, Living Sin, Die in Fire, and You Don't Move Me. After Jonas and Fredrik came back, they changed rehearsal places in different Stockholm areas, but the differences into the music were much evident. These 2 guys were more interested to have fun and drink beer than playing. Also, they wanted to play the Iron Maiden and Saxon style, while on the other hand, Quorthon wanted a more sinister and dark atmosphere into his music. Despite the differences, they remained together until January 1984. Around the end of 1983, Typhoon was creating a compilation album with various artists, and one of those bands were Oz and Bathory. But how did Bathory do to be part of this album? A Finnish band that needed to play denied their participation to this record, so it's around this time that Quorthon said to Typhoon, where boss worked, that he had a band and they were very special. So around January 23rd, 1984, Bathory entered the Elektra studio to record the famous two tracks, The Return of Darkness and Evil and Sacrifice. They recorded late night these two after Oz finished recording for the day their album. After recorded, Bathory split up temporarily. When Typhoon released this compilation album, 95% of the letters they received were for Bathory. So, boss Forsberg said that for June they needed to release their first album, but Quorthon was alone and needed to find other members. Richard Bergman accepted while Elven denied, and he found another member, Stefan Larsson on drums. June 14, the band enters at Evenshore Studio, a simple garage with all cars and motor component and oxygen loss. But why the name Evenshore? Because the owner of the garage was Peter Himmelstrand, and translating his surname is Evenshore. Peter Himmelstrand was a Swedish composer and journalist that died in 1999. Bathory recorded there around 56 hours to don't overcome the Typhoon budget. 3 days more or less, tired as hell, but always with the will to finish the album. Music influences: early Motorhead, Black Sabbath, GBH, Kiss and much more. Faster the better. 2nd October 1984, the Typhoon released their first album, simply called Bathory, and the Swedish metal scene was very enthusiastic of the result. My favorites are Hades and Raise the Dead. And what are yours? Write it in the comments. Many people started to compare the Bathory sound to Venom, but Quorthon always claimed in many interviews that he never listened to Venom before entering the studio, but later. Until today, it's hard to believe to this theory. For the cover artwork, Quorthon cut some parts of the god from horror comics and used a lot of ink to cover the parts that were cut and drew over it. He found inspiration for it thanks to the book Witches by Erika Young. The first press of 1000 copies of the album originally needed to be printed with golden goat and black background, but the result of the print was yellow goat, called the Swedish Gulagetten, and it was, according to Quorthon, terrible result. Second press was the obvious black and white cover. Another mysterious thing for the fans, it was no presentation of the lineup and no promo pictures. According to the book Swedish Death Metal, Ace simply didn't want to confuse people with many band members that were part of this project. After October, Richard Bergman decided to leave the band, while Stefan Larsson remained. On Metal Archives appears another member for the second album of Bathory, entitled The Return, Andreas Johansson on bass, the guy that was probably kicked out because Quorthon saw him taking drugs, so he needed to finish to record the bass tracks alone. This album was recorded at Elektra Studio in February 1985, like the two tracks for the compilation album, published on May 27, 1985. After also this second release, black metal was effectively born. The Return is, according to many, one of the best albums ever recorded together with the first. Fast riffs, fast drums, and it was perfect for that period. Quorthon always disagreed about this. He claimed to be drunk and his voice was not so good. Then he and the other guys in the band didn't have ambitions to become successful. For them it was just a hobby. In my opinion, the best tracks are Total Destruction, The Rite of Darkness and Whip of Evil. Evil riffs are very present on every track of this. Then the atmosphere is able to create with the instruments is awesome. The cover art for this album is simply a picture took from Gunnar Silins, a sound engineer. It contains the full moon with clouds to create a horror atmosphere. In an interview in 1990 at the phone, he said that in horror movies it's always present the full moon and the night as a theme. Typhoon later changed the name in Black Mark, a name more adapted to the terrible, cold and fast sound of Bathory. After the release of The Return, many show organizers started to call the label to appear live on stage and organize a tour, but Bathory was without musicians again. The only few occasions Bathory played live was probably around 1985. Jonas Åkerlund remembered they played live probably 3 times, at dark parties, in a basement and in a cinema, but according to Quorthon the sound wasn't good at all, and it was just for friends. In 1986, Quorthon tried to contact some musicians to play live, and one of these was Chris Richanter, drummer of Sodom Band. They rehearsed some days and nights, but didn't happen anything special from this meeting. Chris didn't want to leave Sodom, they didn't find an agreement, and Chris came back home in Germany. Later, Bathory was scheduled for a tour with Celtic Frost and Destruction in United States and Canada, but it was cancelled. So after this, Bathory refused to play live for all his existence. Then, Bathory always wanted a big stage show with fire and drum riser, but they didn't have money at the time to realize that, so this was another problem to play, and they eventually gave up. He said in more than one interview that he doesn't want to ruin the fans' imagination how Bathory should play on stage. In September of the same year, Bathory entered in the studio again to record the next album. They came back to Heaven Shore, and this album is the most important from black metal, and I'm talking about Under the Sign of the Black Mark. Here is present an important instrument to create a spooky atmosphere, and I'm talking about the keyboard. Quorthon started to play it for the album. Here they started to even have classical music influences. In fact, Quorthon was a big fan of Richard Wagner, a German composer. In an interview to promote this album, he said that his favorite Wagner operas were The Legend of Siegfried and Tristan and Isolde. One of the best songs from the album for me is Call from the Grave. It contains a good dissonance and the lyrics are very good. Then the fast Equimantor contains those fast riffs that even bands like Mayhem took inspiration from. The name Equimantor doesn't mean anything according to Quorthon. The musicians' names are not 100% sure even here, but on Metal Archives there is written a certain Paul Lundberg on drums and Christer Sandstrom on bass. They released this album on May 11, 1987 under the British label Under One Flag. It exists a video on YouTube where it's possible to see Quorthon signing albums at Heavy Sound to promote the album in Stockholm, and there was between people a young Dead, the vocalist of Mayhem and Morbid, and you can watch him telling him to Quorthon to that. Here the scene in Sweden was starting to be more present in all around the world, but according to Quorthon didn't exist a scene at all without rock clubs that promoted death metal. In the underground, bands were playing in punk squats or places like Ultrahuset, but it's not the same like a rock club. At that time, Elektra was receiving mails from fans and even people from abroad, and one of those mailboxes contained even dead animals like hamsters and mouses. One of these people that sent dead animals was of course Per Leolin, which I have dedicated 2 episodes in the previous season. I think it's exactly here the other turning point of Bathory that happened. For Quorthon, writing songs about dark stories and Satanism, it was an innocent thing. He didn't know anything about this stuff, he never made a ritual and wasn't interested to start one. He was just inspired by these horror comics and books, and his guitar and voice did the rest. He also received a box of earth in a plastic bag from a girl that believed it was useful to enrich his powers. Fantasy became a reality, and an interview with Metal Hammer said, you have to draw a very clear line between what you do on stage and what you do privately. Black Metal for Bathory was a finished chapter, also for next releases. So this is the end of part 1, guys. Part 2 will be out soon. Stay tuned. Don't forget to subscribe, like and share my videos, and listen on Spotify as well. See you soon, guys.